Well, hello everybody, welcome back. What we're going to make is we're going to make a one-string musical instrument. Now, the reason we're making it just with one string is that it's much easier. This is a good starting project for someone that wants to make stringed instruments, because you learn about the mechanics of how to build it, plus you learn about the math that goes into where the frets are located. And then when you have three of them, three strings or more, six strings, then it really complicates things. So we're going to start easy with a one-string instrument. So as far as tools go, you're going to need, something to drill holes with. You'll need the bits to drill through the wood with. So the board you're going to need to use is approximately, 3 feet long and 3/4 of an inch wide, and about 1 inch deep. And that's what you're going to be starting with. You have to be quite exact about where you lay out the hole and how wide you mark these little bits that are going to be spread out. And that's what's going to make this kind of a V shape, is you're going to spread out the sides just like this. Okay? Now you're going to need a measuring tool. You're going to need several different types of hammers and mallets. A rubber mallet, leather mallet, and a small metal hammer. You're going to need an assortment of clamps. So you're going to need about 7 or 8 of these. This hole that you're going to drill is going to be about 9 inches from the end, from the bottom or the back end of it. Normally, measuring tool will be marked off in inches or centimeters, or both. In this case, I got them both. This particular tool is something you buy special for making guitars. This is called a fret scale. Depending on the length between the bridge and the nut, it'll give you that measurement here, and then it'll have all the markings laid out where your frets will be cut into, okay? And it makes it much easier for the teacher if you have a couple of these around the shop so that the students can do this themselves. Otherwise, you're going to have to do every single one for every kid, because if you don't, they're going to mess it all up and it won't make any good sounds. I go to a company called Stuart McDonald. They have an online ordering system. I'm not sure about what's available where you live, but you can always check stuartmcdonald.com or stumac.com. You're going to need fret material. Fret wire is what it's called. Okay, and I buy it in these large tubes where there's about, 50 of these pieces in each tube. Okay, so that's a lot of fret wire. That's going to be enough for a couple of years of teaching this course. I'd never buy them pre-cut. I think that's a waste of money because you're going to be cutting these to a special size, and the ones that you buy pre-cut are usually pre-cut for guitars, which is a much wider neck. So you're going to end up cutting, a lot of it off, and you're going to waste it. So if you have a nice long one like this, then you can slowly cut the pieces that you need. Now you see that I have a little piece of black tape on this one. That's because this is a little fatter, a little larger than the rest of my fret wire. Okay, and the larger one I'm going to use for the nut, that very first one that I pointed out. Now, if you can't get fret wire, there are other options. And I'll show you that if you simply get some of these little finish nails, you could cut these in and glue these in, file them off, cut the sizes off, and use nails for your frets if you have to. It's not as desirable as a real, fret, because the way the fret is designed, it's kind of a T-shaped. So the top of it is where the string will go across, but then the T part that comes down, the upright part, that actually goes into the wood and glues in, and it stabilizes it much better than just a regular nail does. So there's a couple things I need to point out before you get started. So if the board is not straight, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So try to get the straightest boards that you can use. The stage where we're gluing and spreading these out and gluing it all together, you need to have a frame on it to keep it straight. If you look at this, I think you might be able to see this, that this is not straight. It's not symmetrical. You see it's kind of going to the side this way a little bit. So it really needs to come back to something like that. So in order to do that, you're going to have to make yourself a little jig. So the jig is like a form, okay? I typically make them the same width as the instrument's going to be. I use a piece of 1/2-inch plywood, a good quality plywood, not the really crappy plywood, because this plywood needs to be straight also. And that's the bottom part of this frame, or the jig. And then you're going to have smaller pieces of plywood that you're going to put on the sides. And so the idea is that your piece is going to fit right in there, and it's going to open up and spread open, and then we're going to glue a piece in to keep it glued in and symmetrical. Okay, so depending on the size, the width that you're making your instrument, the neck of it, in this case is 3/4 of an inch. So these two pieces that we put on this jig need to have a space between them 3/4 of an inch wide. Now in this case, this is a little bit wider. It's about 1 inch. So this jig definitely is wider apart, so it'll fit in there. If you try to fit one of these smaller ones in there, it'll flop around and you won't have that symmetry that you're looking for. Now when you're building your jig, you want to make sure that this piece here is lower than the neck is when you're laying it in there. Okay, so you see the neck is above this little frame right here. That's going to be important. You'll see a little bit later on why. So you need to make your jig first. You see that it's very simple. You know, you take the plywood, you cut a couple of plywood strips. Doesn't really matter how big they are, as long as the inside will fit your wood in there. Besides having the fret scale and the measuring tool and the various hammers and clamps, drilling tools, you're going to need to have a small screwdriver with a small tip on it. You're going to have the parts that you're going to need for building your guitar out of. Now, you'll see that this has got 3. This is for a 3-string one. You can buy them individually. Here's one. This is an individual one. It's a different type. You'll see that the depth of one is slightly lower than the depth of the other. And you can buy these in different depths. You're going to need string. Now this is, I think, about 0.012. So have an assortment of strings and try different strings to see what will work best for you. But you make sure you have all this stuff ready to go. So the first step then will be to lay out where we're going to drill our hole. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to mark that hole where we're going to drill it first. Okay, and in this case, it's about 9 1/4 inches. I'll go ahead and mark that. Okay, and now you want to make sure that it's centered in this direction. And that's where our first work is going to happen, is right on that mark. And I'm going to use the 1/2-inch bit. On the back side, you can see where the hole is coming through, where this is poked through. And you just want to flip it over and finish your cut from the opposite side. Okay, there we go. So we're through. Now before you cut this little center piece out, you need to actually cut down a little bit into the surface of it. Cut this little tiny piece off, or you can rasp that. If you don't feel like you're good with the saw, you're just going to take a little bit off of here, and it needs to be pretty clean. So if you are going to use a rasp, you need to do it very cleanly. But the reason we do that is so that the wood that we're going to use for the skin will set down in that, so that it'll end up being flush right here. We want it to be flush with this part of the fingerboard. So we got to take this little piece off. There, that's pretty flush right there. That's what we want. So after you've taken this top piece off a little bit, the next step will be to go ahead and mark the sides that you're going to be cutting. And it needs to be the same width as the wood that you have left over by the hole. Okay, and you do that on both sides. You don't want to make them too thin. You don't want to make them too fat or too thick. Okay, and we'll set this up in here and start cutting this. Just go ahead and go back and forth. Now generally what I do is I will work like this at an angle where I can see my line and I'm following the line. And I go about that far. Now at this point I'm going to turn it around so I can see the other side. Now I'm going to follow the line on this side. You noticed it got a little bit off the line. So that's why you want to keep going back and forth so you can keep seeing the line on both sides. Now you get it back lined up again. Okay, so you want to get about an inch further, and now you go to the other side. Keep it on the line. Okay, now I'm going to flip it over and go to the other side. So the turning it back and forth is very important. It takes extra time, but it'll guarantee you have a straight cut. There, that's through. And there, that's through. So here's our piece coming out. So the piece that we just took out, that we just cut out of there, we're going to save this and use this for actually spreading it apart when we get to that point. So I'm going to use this clamp to give it a little extra strength there so that I can spread these out as far as they need to go without it breaking. Okay? And the piece that we cut out of the inside will go in between. Now, actually, this is the piece that I cut out of the inside, but I want to go with a fatter piece in this particular case. So you can get a piece that's the right height, and you're just going to be spreading it apart. I'm going to go ahead and mark it. So in this case, it's about this much of an angle. And that'll go here approximately. And we'll set that in there just to see. Yeah, that'll fit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue here and here. Now, if you put too much glue, what will happen is you'll glue your whole project to your jig, and you don't want to do that. So you only need a little tiny bit of glue here. Make sure that you have the piece that you've prepared facing up. Okay, and then you're going to spread it apart. Now don't forget to put your clamp on it. Help keep it from snapping. And you want to do this slowly. You don't want to try to do this too fast because you do need to take time. And you spread that out. Set that in. Now you notice it needs to come that way a little bit. So I'll just take a hammer and tap on the end of it. Okay, there we go. We got a nice spot here. Now using that jig like that, it'll keep it nice and symmetrical. The next step is going to be putting the skin on. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark this the size I need. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. I can trim that off later. Okay, there we go. Nice clean cut, and that'll fit just like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the back side, make sure it lines up everywhere. But I'm going to cut this a little bit wide now, and I'll fit it more precisely later. So I'm going to give myself about a little more than 1/8 of an inch or so. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this out with a knife. and then I'm going to come back later and clean it all up. But if I make this the right size now, then it may not fit later on or on the back. I don't want to cut too much off. Again, the old adage, you can always cut more off if it's too big, but if you make it too small, you can't cut any more off to fit it. So I always cut it a little bit big and then make it fit better later. Okay, there it is. So now this piece is going to go just like that. Before I glue this on, I'd like to go ahead and mark this for the back. Pre-mark it so that it's ready to go, and while it's drying, I can cut the back. So now we're going to go ahead and put glue in and clamp this piece on so it can dry. What I do want to check is where my bridge is going to be, which I'm going to guess at about 1.5 inches up from the end. I'm just going to guess at it. And on the scale that I'm going to be using, it's planning for 24 9/16 of an inch from the bridge to the nut. And then 9/16 of an inch is just a little more than a 1/2 inch. So this is where my nut is going to be. Okay, so now what I can start doing while I'm waiting for this to dry is to go ahead and mark out for my frets. You'll notice that it says nut. That's where you want to put that mark right there. And then you start marking your frets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's our octave point. 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. So those are marks for our frets. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a square, a small square, and square all these up. It's important that you stay really precise here. Otherwise the tone will come out a little bit weird. And then you're ready to start cutting for your frets. This is called a fret cutting saw, and it is available from Stuart MacDonald again, and it's adjustable on how the depth, how deep it'll go. So that's what these little adjustments are here. This can either go deeper, you see, by moving it, or shallower. This little piece of plastic here will keep it from going too deep. So that's as deep as it'll go right there. Okay, this is the last one. That's the nut. So remember, the nut and the bridge are some very important milestones that you need to be measuring to, and they have to be exact. We'll get us a piece of fret material out, and then there is this piece that I've already marked that I know is the nut. Okay, now you could go ahead and pre-cut your fret wire the width of your neck, and you have all your pieces ready to go. So I'm going to pre-mark my frets, and then I'm going to cut them all at the same time. And then this is going to be the nut. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that first. Okay, and we know that that very first one is the nut right there. And if you want to put just a little tiny spot of glue where it's going to go into the wood, you want to do this one time. If you have to do this over and over again, it's going to be a problem. So you want to get it right the first time. There it is, and then wipe off that excess glue. It's sticking over just a tiny bit on each side. After the glue is dried, we'll come back with the file. So we can go ahead and put all the frets on now while we're waiting for that to dry. One at a time. I'm going to dip a little tiny bit in the glue. Make sure it's set all the way in. Clean the little excess glue off. And go to the next one. Now, you don't want to hammer this too hard because you'll set it too deep. All right, so those will dry. This is probably almost dry enough by now. But let's start planning out for our next step, which is going to be preparing the area for the tuner. So this gear is designed to be facing the bridge. Okay, so in this case, the tuning peg would be facing up from my way. I'm going to place the center of this peg about 1.5 inches away from the nut. So this looks good to me, right about there. And I'm going to drill a hole right in the center. Now you want to have this straight up and down. You don't want it leaning one way or another. Just do your best. Keep it straight up and down. Okay, my hole went all the way through. That fits in nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and take it off of the jig right now. Usually want to leave this set for 24 hours. Let that glue get very, very dry. Okay, and we gently take this out. Okay, and there we go. You can see from the color of the glue that it's not quite dry all the way yet, but it's getting there. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put this tuner underneath, see how much we need to cut out. So in this case, the tuner does not stick up past, you don't want it to stick up past where the surface is, because the string needs to be going downward to the tuner, because it needs to hit this nut. It needs to stay on the nut all the time, the string. So you need to have it a little cut away. So I'm going to go ahead and use a rasp, and I'm just simply going to rasp that one area, and it needs to be far enough down that you can get the string in the hole. I'm going to use the fine side because once this is in, I don't want to have to sand it anymore much in that area. Okay, that looks good to me. So here are the screws that come with the tuner, or you might have to buy these separate. They're very small. You want to line this up nice and straight. Press in, and then again, you want to keep constant pressure on this so that you don't strip the screw. And once you get it snug, you need to stop, because you will strip the screw. Or you could even break the screw head off, which I have done before. Okay, you want to make sure this is lined up nice and straight, and put that screw in. Okay, there's nice, firm, straight. See the hole through here. Everything looks good. We're ready now for either trimming off the excess wood here, or filing off the little sharp edges of the frets. You need to make sure that you file down in this direction and not drag it back, because when you drag it back, it's going to want to pull the fret out. So take your time. Make sure it's dry. Now these are not dry. I just put them in, but I'm being super gentle with it. And you want to feel it. Make sure you're not feeling a sharp edge. Right here I still feel sharp edges. So I'm going to go along the entire length and do the same process. Make sure we have a nice smooth edge. Okay, that feels pretty smooth. Could get a little bit of sandpaper, and that'll make it even smoother. Okay, now your hand can move without cutting it. And we do the opposite side. Okay, there. Nice and smooth. I can move my hand back and forth and it won't cut me. Okay, so that is ready to be trimmed right here. And I'm going to let the glue dry just a little bit longer and prepare my back piece that goes on the back side. You might be wondering why I'm using a knife instead of a saw. Well, when you use a saw, what you end up doing is splintering the wood. Do you see how this is splintered? I don't know if you can see that. The edge is kind of splintered and rough. And when you're going along the length of the grain, it'll splinter even worse. And pieces will come off, and it won't ruin the project, but it won't look beautiful. And come check this one out. Now, I could very carefully at this point start doing that same process along the edge to trim this up. Now, another way is to go like this, okay? But again, you got to make sure you have a really sharp knife for that process. Or you could use a rasp, but the rasp is a little tricky because it vibrates, and if it's not, if you don't make the stroke go all the way through that way, if you drag it back, you'll get the splintering. So let's try it. You see how it splinters here? Now we can try the knife, see how that works. When the kids try doing this, if they're not really good with a knife, they'll end up cutting this wood. And you don't want to do that because this wood is quite thin. Won't take much to cut through that, and you're going to have to start all over again. Now you want to be careful not to sand too much on the top side, because that will definitely expose the next layer of plywood. And it won't matter as far as the sound goes, it won't change things, but it just doesn't look as beautiful. The top and the front are pretty much done except for a sound hole. Because this is so thin, this plywood, that when you're putting it on a big machine and drilling that hole, you can really do some damage really fast. So it's easy enough just to cut it with a knife, and that might be how we're going to do this. You could do a round hole, like the examples that I showed. You could do a diamond-shaped hole, or even a kind of like curvy one if you wanted to. So we need to be in front of the bridge maybe about 1 inch. So the hole should be about right here. Okay? Now you can go ahead and measure that, or you can just sight it down the middle like this. It's hard to measure from these curvy sides, so it's best to line it up with the center all the way down this way, and you'll know that that's where this hole's going to be, the center. Okay, and I'm going to go about that far through. So we're going to go through the rest of the way from the back side. That will help keep the splintering down to a minimum. So now I'm going to go ahead and use my knife to clean it up and make it a little bit bigger. Okay, now when you're cutting into this, you need to go, you don't want to go against the grain. You want to go with the grain all the time. Okay, same thing over here. You want to go that way, this way, you want to go this way. And you just keep pecking away at it until you have a bigger and bigger hole until you're happy with it. So I'm not going to make it much bigger than this. It doesn't need to be giant size. It can be a smallest one like this. And the sanding will actually help make it round and big. Okay, so we're finishing up that. And that's as big as the hole. Big as I'm going to make it. So now we can go ahead and glue the back side on. This is going right on the surface of it. This piece here went flush. If you notice, flush with the top fingerboard. On the bottom, it doesn't matter if you do that. In fact, you don't need it at all. So the back side is glued. Front side's got pretty much everything done on it. Now, while we're waiting for the back side to dry, I'm going to go ahead and prepare a small piece of wood that's going to be the bridge. And I'm going to go ahead and clean this up just a little bit with a rasp and sandpaper. So once the back has been dried, after the clamps have been on it for a while and it's dried off, Then you can go ahead and trim it up and get it finished and prepare for the string. Okay, remember, patience is your friend. Being in a hurry is not your friend. So now I'm going to put this little nail on the end. It's a copper nail, about 3/4 of an inch long. You want to leave it stick out about 1/8 of an inch. That way you can get your loop over it. Okay, and then you're going to go down the length of it, keep some pressure on it. And then you have to decide if you want to tighten it this way and loosen it this way, then you need to wrap your string in such a way that it's going to help create that. So tighten it this way. So I'm going to feed it in through this hole. Okay, and then I'm going to loop it through again. I'm going to go ahead and start tightening it. I'm going to put a nail in to keep it from moving around. Okay, that should be enough. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and keep tightening it. Now, before I get it all the way tightened, I'm going to go ahead and put my bridge on. Okay, you see how far the string is away from the frets? That's pretty far. We could lay it down and see what happens if we go flat. Okay, so you notice that each note that I made was a clean note. It didn't have a buzzing sound, so we didn't need the bridge to be up high. Sometimes if there's a bit of a warp, you'll need to make a higher bridge, but this is a lower bridge. And again, it's floating, so we can move it back and forth to make the tone a little bit better. So let's see. Now what you could do is you could drill a small hole in at the right intervals and take a small dowel of wood, maybe a darker colored wood, and glue it into that hole and sand it all down so that you have a nice, clean, finished looking marker for all of your frets. Okay, so here we are with a completed little one-string musical instrument. Now you could call it whatever you'd like to call it. This is a good starting project if you're going to go forward maybe in the high school and make more complicated musical instruments like the 3-string one. You can make the same design and everything with 3 strings. You just make the neck a bit wider so you have more room for those strings. Well, thanks again for watching these videos, and especially this one. It's been a pleasure. I hope you stay tuned. We're going to be putting together another series for the high school possibilities, and I'll see you then. Meanwhile, take care, be safe, and have fun. Bye-bye.